I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for streaming with us. Ukraine's military is bracing for a major new Russian offensive as Vladimir Putin shifts his war strategy. Russian forces are said to be preparing for a full-scale push into southeastern Ukraine. Satellite images show clusters of tanks 8 miles long on the move in western Russia near the Ukraine border. And the Kremlin has reportedly put a new military commander in charge of concentrating its attacks. Alexander Dvornikov is known as the Butcher of Syria for his role in Russia's brutal campaign in that country. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy says Ukraine has tens of thousands of soldiers ready to fight the Russian offensive. He's urging President Biden and other Western leaders, as well as South Korea, to do more to help his country. Foreign correspondent James Longman starts us off outside Kyiv.
Battle lines shifting as Russian forces amass in the east. These new satellite images show an 8-mile-long Russian military convoy headed towards the northeastern city of Kharkiv. Ukraine's second-largest city has already faced weeks of Russian shelling, residential neighborhoods completely destroyed.
East of Kyiv, Brigadier General Valery Embakov gave us an exclusive look at where his soldiers beat back Russian troops.
And right here on this spot, he says, from that farm, our boys used those javelins to do what you now see behind me. He tells us 2 Russian tank columns were headed down this road when his troops ambushed them, stopping the Russian advance.
You're very proud of your victory here.
Yes.
But are you as confident about the war that's starting in the east?
Ukraine needs more modern weapons, he says. But if in the first stage we needed mostly defensive anti-tank weapons, anti-air weapons, now we need heavy weaponry. We need tanks, we need planes, we need artillery systems. The destruction here, a fraction of what Russia might unleash in the next phase. This woman clinging to the only family member she has left.
You come across all kinds of emotions. I mean, this man is furious. This woman's quite clearly beside herself. There's also happiness at liberation. They greeted this general, full of joy that they've seen now Ukrainian forces here.
This country is still reeling from the shocking Russian attack on a train station in the eastern city of Kramatorsk. It left 57 people dead, including at least 5 children. Thousands have been using the station, trying to flee the east ahead of Russia's next attack. Ukrainian President Zelenskyy vowing his country will be ready, saying they can even use more missiles against us, even more aerial bombs, but we're preparing for all our actions. We will respond. And over the weekend, in a show of solidarity, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson arrived in Ukraine. He toured the streets of Kyiv with President Zelenskyy. And as Russia now shifts its strategy, Putin has named a new commander in Ukraine, General Alexander Dvornikov. He previously led Russian forces in Syria, a campaign where human rights investigators say Russian forces deliberately targeted civilian populations and destroyed cities.
Diane, we're at a school which was being used by Russian troops as a base, and you can see the level of devastation. I mean, this was a school bus quite clearly burned out. We're also getting an idea of what Russian troops were doing while they were here, and a lot of it looks like they were stealing, they were looting. These are computer monitors that have been taken out of the building. Over here, you can see white goods, washing machines, trying to take out anything that was valuable. So the level of devastation in this part of Ukraine is extraordinary, but the focus now is on the east of this country, and the war for the east and the south is now going to be brutal. Diane?
All right, James Longman, thank you. And let's bring in ABC News contributor and retired Marine Colonel Stephen Ganyard for more on this. Colonel, how significant is this change in strategy when it comes to the number of Russian troops deployed in eastern Ukraine? What can 50 or 100,000 troops do that 20 or 25,000 could not?
Yeah, Diane, I think it's important to step back and think about what was the initial strategy that the Russians had, and that was to very quickly take the capital of Kyiv and to decapitate the government and to throw Zelenskyy out of power and put a puppet regime in that Russia could control. And so most of the effort was around Kyiv by the Russians, although they did attack other parts of the country, and they've had more success in other parts of the country. The Ukrainians smartly prioritized the area around Kyiv to defend the capital and defend the government. Now that the Russians have failed and the Russians are moving over to the east towards the Donbas region, there will be concentrating troops in a way that they hadn't in the past. So those of us who failed to believe that Mr. Putin was going to invade in the first place did so for some solid logic, and that is if even 150 or 170,000 troops deployed around the size of a country, the state of Texas, just wasn't enough. So one thing to be concerned about is now that he is concentrating the troops, moving, we've seen those long supply trains, moving them down towards the Donbas region. I think we do need to be concerned that there's a saying that quantity has its own quality, and in this sense, we need to be concerned that the Russians will concentrate troops where, even though their failures in the past may be apparent, they may be able to overcome just with sheer numbers.
Now, Russia holds significantly more territory in eastern Ukraine than it did around Kyiv. So how big of an advantage is that?
Well, remember that they already sort of held those separatist regions in the Donbass. And as I said, when they focused on defending around Kyiv, they had to pull troops back from the south and from the east. And so what the Russians have been facing in that part of the Ukraine is not the full force of the Ukrainian military. So the Ukrainian military will also have to shift more troops and assets towards the east and towards the south. But what we've seen is that the Russians have been able to sort of carve out that land bridge, that strip of land between Russia that goes all the way across to Crimea. Before this, they had to take sort of an over-water route to get to Crimea. So a couple of things to think about here. One is that Putin needs to take as much of the Donbass as he can. Remember that when he declared war, he was saying that I am going to liberate the Donbass. And so he has to go back home and be able to tell the Russian people that he has conquered the Donbass and done what he said he's done. But then there's a strategic idea here where if he's not going to be able to topple the government, he's going to want to be able to take that land bridge to the south to be able to create sort of that strategic buffer between Ukraine and Russia.
And Russia has appointed the so-called butcher of Syria to lead its forces in Ukraine. Is that just a natural progression due to his position, or does this indicate some kind of a shift in strategy?
Yeah, Diane, it was always a bit curious that there was no central single commander in the Russian effort. So in most principles of war, unity of command is a thing, and it is very, very important, and you'll find that in most militaries. There's one person in charge that has to direct the battle. The Russians didn't have that. So the guy that they've now put in charge is the most senior, but he's already been responsible for that area around the Donbass. And so we haven't really seen much out of him up to this point. Maybe he's going to improve things. But remember, the flaws that we've seen in the Russian military are systemic. It's training, it's logistics, it's leadership. None of those things can be fixed by a single general. But we'll just have to wait and see whether he's more or particularly ruthless when he pursues things in the Donbass.
And Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy says that he's still committed to pressing for peace despite the Russian attacks on civilians. Where does this shift in Russia's strategy leave those negotiations?
Well, it makes it quite difficult for Zelenskyy. He's looking for a way out. He's looking for some sort of a ceasefire. But when the Russians do things like deliberately shell civilians sitting on platforms by train stations, we went back and we looked. We saw those pictures of where the impact points at the train station were, and they were where the civilians were congregating. Those were precision weapons. They deliberately landed there. Nothing landed on the railroad tracks. You can understand if they wanted to take out the railroad tracks. So when things like that happen, these atrocities, the atrocities that are being discovered all over Ukraine as the Russian forces pull back, make it very difficult for Zelenskyy to sue for peace. And so it's a very tough problem where he needs to get his country out of the war, but he can't cede too much territory or give in to Putin too much.
All right. Colonel Steve Ganyard, always great to have you. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane.
Coming up, the latest reaction to a new transgender law signed by Alabama's governor that outlaws transgender health care for minors. When we come back, Representative Neil Rafferty, the only openly gay member of the Alabama legislature, joins us live. Welcome back. Civil rights groups are promising lawsuits after the Alabama governor signed 2 new restrictive transgender laws. One law makes it a felony for a doctor to administer gender-affirming health care to minors. The other would ban classroom discussions about sexual orientation and gender identity in elementary schools and require students K through 12 to use bathrooms designated for their biological sex. Alex Prechet has more.
It's the latest instance of legislation targeting LGBTQ youth. Alabama Governor Kay Ivey signing 2 bills. One makes it illegal to teach about sexual orientation and gender identity in grades K through 5. The other bans transgender health care for minors. Anyone who violates faces a felony punishable by up to 10 years in prison.
It was just a private journey going on between me, my family, and my doctors.
The new legislation's made 15-year-old Harley Walker feel like she has no choice but to speak out publicly.
If I did stop my gender affirming care, my physical outside wouldn't reflect on who I was inside. And that would like completely destroy me mentally and physically.
Dr. Marissa Ladinsky treats transgender children in the state.
To take away hope is to take away not just mental health, but physical health for so many innocent kids.
Alabama State Rep Wes Allen, who sponsored a version of the bill, says this about puberty blockers and hormone therapy.
The bill does not prohibit mental health counseling. It just prohibits those powerful medications.
While the FDA hasn't approved puberty blockers for gender-affirming care, those treatments have been used for decades in very young children, but considered off-label. Alabama's law is one of at least 3 of its kind across the country. Legal battles over this one already in the works. Supporters of the new law says it's about protecting children.
We don't want them to make these decisions at such 11 and 12, 13 years old that's going to impact them years down the road.
Several LGBTQ plus organizations are vowing legal action.
It isn't constitutional, and it's criminalizing medical professionals who have taken an oath to provide gender-affirming care.
Harley's dad just wants to see his children happy.
For me, that's helping Harley with her journey as a trans person.
Our thanks to Alex Prochet for that report. And Alabama Representative Neil Rafferty, the only openly gay member of the Alabama legislature. He's been very outspoken on both of these laws and joins me now with more. Representative Rafferty, thank you for being here. You have said that these bills are undermining family rights, health rights, and access to health care. So what impact do you think these laws will have?
Remains to be seen what the impact these laws will have. There's no doubt that this will take a toll on the youth, the children and their families, as far as having greater stress. As I said on the floor, it's hard enough growing up. It's even harder growing up and being different. But imagine growing up, being different, and then having the state legislature, the leaders of the state putting a target on your back. That's just an impossible thing for me to kind of have to sit here and try to wrap my head around and consider. So I think the important thing is to let those youth and those families know that I have their back. There's a lot of organizations here on the ground that have their back and that want to support. So do not be afraid to reach out.
Now, Governor Kay Ivey said that she signed the bill restricting gender-affirming care to protect children from life-altering drugs and surgeries when they're at such a vulnerable stage in life. So what do you say to the bill's supporters who argue that minors aren't equipped to make decisions like this and might later regret those hormone treatments or those surgeries?
This is a talking point that they have been putting out and pushing since they first introduced this bill 3 years ago. And I said first time 3 years ago, I absolutely agree. I don't think anybody's going to argue that a minor needs to be making these decisions by themselves. That is why the gender-affirming care model is based on making sure that the child is the center of it, but the parents and then a team of healthcare and mental health care providers around the family to help guide them through the process. So we're not making any sort of permanent decision or anything like that. It's just guiding the minor through the process along with the family. And it's a very intensive process. It's not something that's just done overnight. It's not something that's just done in the process of a couple of months. I mean, we're talking about a lifelong process here. So that talking point's mute, if you want to ask me, because that's just a total misrepresentation and misunderstanding of the standards of care for gender-affirming care.
And can you describe that process in a little bit more detail? Just what goes into making that decision to offer this kind of care?
So I think that, probably Dr. Marissa Ladinsky would be probably the best one to ask that for. But I can say that the process starts off with, my understanding starts off with counseling, a diagnosis of a need to treat this condition physically, and then a very slow use of the drugs until it becomes very slow use of the drugs until the child is is an adult and is ready to make a more informed decision at that point. I can say that, that's part of the misrepresentation of it is that this, they started off with this whole, we're going to ban these surgeries and these permanent procedures. And the thing is with that is that that's not part of the standard of care. No minors are receiving that, not here in Alabama at least. So I don't know why that was such a thing that they kept harping on, other than to just create shock and awe and get people really rallied up, and so that they could put like I said, the target on these children's and their families' backs.
And as for the other law, Ivy said that it will ensure our elementary school classrooms remain free from any kind of sex talk. That was her quote. What's your response to that?
Well, I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding of sexuality and gender identity and sex. We're not talking about sex education. We're not talking about anything like that, but we are talking about the recognition of families. That there are gay people, lesbians, bisexual people who have children, who have families, who are married, who are in committed relationships. But this is just a complete denial and erasure of that. I was really offended when one of my colleagues, Representative Scott Stadhagen, said on the floor regarding this bill that it's kind of like looking at movie ratings. You have G, PG, PG-13, and R. And the existence of LGBTQ people is not a rated PG-13 or rated R human experience. We're not talking about sex. We're not talking about how to have sex. None of that's part of the discussion here. What we're talking about is that, there's a diversity of human experience, and that there should be no reason to prohibit the discussion of those in an age-appropriate manner.
So how do you plan to fight these bills now that they have been signed into law?
Well, I think that's going to be up to the courts now. Speaking with the Biden administration, talk to the Department of Justice, you can see that they've issued several statements regarding this, as well as with HRSA. So I think it's going to be, right now, the HRC, the SPLC, the Center for Lesbian Rights, and Lambda Legal have all teamed up, all have plaintiffs and are ready to go.
All right, Representative Neil Rafferty, we appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane.
Coming up, the remarkable story of how a man reconnected with his family after being stolen from his mother as a newborn. Stay with us. Welcome back to ABC News Live. A manhole explosion sent people running for their lives in New York City's Times Square, initially sparking fears of an attack. Live stream video from EarthCam shows a bird's-eye view of the moment Sunday night. Energy company Con Edison says the manhole exploded due to a cable failure and caused a second manhole to start smoking. Firefighters found elevated levels of carbon monoxide in a building nearby, but there were no reports of injuries or property damage. The CEO of Twitter has announced that Elon Musk will not be joining the board after all. The head of Tesla and SpaceX recently became Twitter's largest shareholder. There was no explanation for why Musk is no longer joining the board, but the CEO says he believes this is for the best. The White House is expected to unveil a new rule today to regulate so-called ghost guns. Those are guns that are usually made at home and untraceable. According to the ATF, each year since 2016, those numbers have grown in numbers, and almost 24,000 were seized from potential crime scenes from 2016 to 2020, according to the DOJ. The move comes amid a rise in gun violence in big cities across America to levels not seen since the 1990s. We will bring you President Biden's remarks live this afternoon. And the district attorney in Rio Grande City, Texas, says he's asking a judge to drop the case against a Texas woman accused of giving herself an abortion. Lizelle Herrera was arrested Thursday after a grand jury indicted her for causing the death of a fetus. An abortion rights group helped secure her release from jail. And we have some good news for travelers. An analyst for Gas Buddy predicts the national price average for a price of gas of a gallon will drop below $4 per gallon this week. And travel chaos is disrupting the spring break season. JetBlue and Spirit Airlines canceled hundreds of flights this weekend, and JetBlue says it's reducing its summer flight schedule despite the expected surge in air travel. Transportation correspondent Gio Benitez has the latest. Hi, Gio.
Hey, Diane, it was a bad weekend for a couple of airlines, and the troubles aren't over just yet. JetBlue and Spirit over the weekend canceling more than 500 flights. You'll remember just last week, they were among the airlines canceling thousands of flights. This time, the airlines blame bad weather and staffing issues. Thousands of passengers stranded at airports and scrambling to find new flights. Now, JetBlue's president apologized in a memo to employees saying, "We are letting you and our customers down," and that is not consistent with what we stand for. We are working around the clock to address some of the most difficult operating conditions we have ever faced as a company. She also says JetBlue will cut flights for the rest of April to reduce last-minute cancellations, but they are also reducing flights this summer by at least 8 to 10%, just as more and more people are traveling. Diane?
All right, Gio Benitez, thank you. And now to the story of a Texas firefighter and his remarkable journey to reconnect with family he never knew existed. The reunion comes after Tyler Graff learned he was stolen from his birth mother shortly after he was born. Our Juju Chang was there when he traveled back to his birthplace for the first time.
Who was Tyler Graff before all this began?
Just an ordinary 38-year-old American man. I have a wife and kid. I work for the City of Houston Fire Department. I was adopted by a very loving, caring family. I think it was just knowing that my story did start before I was adopted. So it's kind of like missing the first 5 minutes of the movie.
After becoming a father, Tyler began trying to learn about his birth family. Suddenly, a call he never expected.
That must have been the shock of your life.
Yes. That's when they sat me down and told me who I was, how they know who I am, and what the true backstory really is.
Tyler had been stolen from his birth mother. She was told he died shortly after childbirth. The practice of coercive adoptions became widespread under dictator Augusto Pinochet's reign in Chile during the 70s and 80s. Thousands of babies taken, trafficked around the world through a complex network that included hospitals, the Catholic Church, and the Chilean government.
Judges, doctors, midwives, social assistants, they were all involved.
The American families, like Tyler's, say they had no idea that the baby they'd adopted had been stolen. When Tyler's birth mother, Hilda Quesada Godoy, realized that the baby boy she'd last laid eyes on in 1983 was actually alive, she couldn't believe it.
Quería gritar, me cuestioné muchas cosas. El pensar si él estuvo con cariño, comía bien, si pasaba frío.
Now, Tyler is heading to his birthplace, Chile, for the first time.
No estoy en Chile.
Ahí.
Sí.
Tyler meeting the sisters he never knew he had. Their family whole for the first time.
If anyone's gonna catch anything, it's my mom. They say she'll outfish anybody.
Transported, if only for a moment, to a life that could have been.
Cheers. To be a good mother, it doesn't take a fancy house, it doesn't take money. It's pretty simple. It's open arms and a huge heart, filled with nothing but support and love.
So many profound revelations like that, and Tyler is planning so many more family reunions. But after his life-changing discovery, Tyler is now helping other families find their lost ones. In fact, he started a foundation, Connecting Roots, and he even brought DNA tests back with him to Chile so that other mothers searching for their children have a shot at finding them too. Diane?
All right, Juju Chang, incredible story. Thank you for that. And you can see the full story tonight on Nightline. And thank you for joining us. I'm Diane Macedo. Stay with us as ABC News Live continues with news, context, and analysis right after this.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.